The carousel groaned to life, and the first suitcase came tumbling down the ramp with a metallic clatter. I was standing at gate 14 baggage claim, still wearing my travel hoodie, my ears ringing from 6 hours in the air, when I heard it, a high, panicked yelp coming from a kennel 2 carts over. I turned just in time to see a woman in a cream blazer and oversized sunglasses crouched beside my carrier, her manicured fingers already working the zipper on the mesh door. "Ma'am," I said, my voice cracking with disbelief, "that's my dog." She didn't even flinch. She looked up at me over the rim of her sunglasses like I was an inconvenience standing between her and something she'd already decided belonged to her. "This is Bella," she said flatly. "She was stolen from my community 8 months ago." I'd recognize that white patch on her ear anywhere. My 8-week-old golden retriever puppy, the one I had just flown 1,100 miles to bring home, the one whose paperwork was folded in my carry-on, whose breeder had texted me 3 times during the flight asking if we landed safe, let out another cry as this stranger's fingers found the zipper pull. That's when I heard the click of nails on tile behind me, quick and deliberate, followed by a low, controlled bark that made half the baggage claim area go silent. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Before we get into this one, if you're new here, I post true stories about the strangers who show up in our lives at the worst possible moments, and the wild ways karma has a habit of finding them. This is one of those stories, and I promise you, by the time we get to the airport confrontation, you're going to need to pause and catch your breath. So grab your coffee, get comfortable, and let's get into it. 3 weeks before that scene at baggage claim, my life looked nothing like an airport thriller. I was Emily, 31, recently divorced, and finally, settling into a little rental house on Maple Crest Lane after 2 years of bouncing between apartments while my ex and I untangled a decade of shared everything. The house wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, a crooked back porch, a yard just big enough for a dog to run circles in. But it was mine, in the way that nothing had felt like mine in years, and the first thing I did after signing the lease was call a breeder 3 states away about a golden retriever litter I'd been eyeing on Instagram for months. Her name, before I even met her, was already Daisy in my head. I'd pictured her running through that little backyard 100 times before I ever booked the flight. The neighborhood itself seemed sleepy and pleasant at first glance, manicured lawns, a community mailbox cluster, a small sign at the entrance that read, Maple Crest Homeowners Association, Pride in Community. I didn't think much of it. I'd never lived under an HOA before, but how bad could a few lawn rules really be? I should have paid more attention to that sign. Her name was Deborah Voss, and I met her exactly 4 days after moving in, when she appeared on my porch unannounced holding a laminated binder like it was a legal deposition. "You're the new tenant," she said, not a question. "I'm Deborah. HOA president, and also your neighbor 2 doors down." She glanced past me into my half-unpacked living room like she was cataloging violations in real time. "I noticed your trash bins were out past 8 a.m. on collection day. That's a $25 fine, first offense." I laughed, thinking she was joking. She was not joking. She handed me an actual invoice. Over the following weeks, I learned that Deborah didn't just enforce the HOA rules, she seemed to live for them. She patrolled the street most mornings in her white SUV, binder on the passenger seat, phone camera ready. She'd find the Andersons for a bird bath, outside approved architectural guidelines. She'd sent a certified letter to the Kapoors about a garden gnome she deemed inconsistent with community aesthetic standards. And she had, apparently, spent the better part of a year in an escalating feud with a family who'd since moved away, a feud that, I'd later learn, involved a golden retriever puppy that family used to own. But at the time, all I knew was that Deborah Voss made my skin crawl every time her SUV idled past my window, and that she'd asked me, twice, whether I was planning on getting a pet, in a tone that made the question feel less like small talk and more like an interrogation. The first real conflict came 2 weeks later, the day I brought home a second-hand wooden dog house I'd bought off a neighborhood marketplace app, intending to set it up in the backyard before Daisy's flight home. I'd barely gotten it off the truck bed before Deborah's SUV rolled to a stop at the curb. That structure requires HOA architectural approval before installation, she called out, already halfway out of her car with her phone raised, filming. I'm going to need you to submit a request form before you place that anywhere visible from the street. It's a doghouse, Deborah. It's going in the backyard. The backyard is visible from the Hendersons' upstairs window. I've had complaints. There had been no complaints. I knew there had been no complaints, because I'd met the Hendersons the week before and they'd told me, unprompted, that Deborah reported things to herself half the time and called it community feedback. I filed the form anyway, mostly to avoid another laminated invoice. But something about the exchange stuck with me, the way she'd asked, almost too casually, whether the doghouse was for a specific breed, and the way her eyes had lingered on the little wooden nameplate I'd already carved, Daisy. I didn't think much of it then. I should have. The trouble really started the week I flew out to pick up Daisy. I'd left the doghouse fully assembled in the backyard, a new bag of puppy food in the garage, and a brand new baby gate still in its box on the porch, waiting to be installed by my sister, who was house-sitting while I traveled. My sister called me the morning after I landed for my layover, her voice tight with confusion. The baby gate's gone. And I swear the dog food bag was full yesterday, now it's like half empty and just sitting open on the porch. Maybe you moved it and forgot, I offered, half asleep in an airport hotel room. I didn't touch it. And there were muddy paw prints on the porch this morning. Big ones. We don't have a dog yet. 2 days later, the doghouse nameplate, the one I'd carved myself, reading Daisy, was gone entirely, pried off the little wooden structure and never seen again. My sister found scratch marks on the fence gate, like someone had tried, unsuccessfully, to get it open from the outside. Someone was watching the house. Someone knew a puppy was coming. And someone seemed to want her before she ever got there. My sister, bless her, didn't wait for me to fly home to do something about it. She called our cousin Marcus, an off-duty airport security officer who moonlighted doing home security installs, and within a day he'd mounted 2 discrete cameras, one aimed at the porch, one at the backyard fence line, and synced them to an app on my sister's phone. It took less than 48 hours to get a hit. The footage showed a cream-colored Blazer and a familiar white SUV idling at the curb just after 6 a.m. A woman climbed out, glanced up and down the street, and let herself through the side gate using what looked like a spare key. She crouched by the dog food bag, filled a plastic container from it, then moved to the porch, picked up the boxed baby gate, and loaded it into her trunk like she was simply retrieving her own property. My sister zoomed in. It was Deborah. But the real chill came from the second clip, time-stamped the following morning, Deborah standing at the fence line, phone to her ear, saying, loud enough for the camera mic to catch, I already told the shelter I'm fostering a golden retriever puppy arriving this week. I have the paperwork ready. Nobody's going to question a woman with paperwork. My sister sent me that clip while I was standing in a rental car line 3 states away, a text simply reading, Watch this before you fly home. She's planning something at the airport. I watched it twice, standing in that parking garage, my stomach turning over. Deborah Voss wasn't just petty. She was planning to intercept my puppy, the puppy whose flight details I'd unwisely posted on the neighborhood app weeks earlier, thanking neighbors in advance for understanding that new arrival, and she intended to walk into an airport and claim a stranger's dog using fake paperwork and enough confidence to make security believe her before anyone thought to ask questions. I called Marcus immediately. As it turned out, he wasn't just handy with cameras, he still had contacts at the very airport I was flying back through, including a former K-9 handler he'd trained alongside years earlier. I explained everything, the footage, the stolen dog food, the missing nameplate, the phone call about fake fostering paperwork, and the date and flight number stamped in permanent marker on my own memory. Marcus didn't hesitate. Text me your arrival gate and time. I'll make some calls. I boarded my connecting flight home with the puppy carrier at my feet, Daisy's tiny snores audible even over the engine hum, with absolutely no idea that Deborah Voss was already 3 hours ahead of me, driving to the very same airport, cream blazer pressed, laminated, fostering paperwork, tucked under her arm. Which brings us back to that carousel, that yelp, and Deborah's fingers on the kennel zipper. "Ma'am," I said again, louder this time, stepping between her and the carrier, "step away from my dog." "This is Bella," she repeated, louder now too, playing to the small crowd that had started to gather near the carousel. "I have fostering documentation right here." She held up a folder like it was a trump card. That's when the second sound came, nails on tile, quick and controlled, and a uniformed K-9 officer rounded the corner with a sleek Belgian Malinois at his side, the dog's ears sharp, its posture alert but calm. Beside him walked Marcus, badge visible, phone already recording. "Ma'am, step back from the carrier," the officer said, his tone even but firm. Deborah straightened, pulling her folder tighter against her chest. "I'm the rightful owner of this animal. I've already filed a police report about a stolen dog 8 months ago." "We checked," Marcus said calmly, holding up his own phone. "There's no active stolen pet report matching this description in this county. But there is a home security clip from 6 days ago of a woman matching your description removing property from a residence on Maple Crest Lane, and a recorded phone call about intercepting a shipment at an airport using falsified fostering paperwork." The crowd around baggage claim had fully stopped now, a dozen strangers, phones half raised, murmuring. A teenager near the carousel muttered, "Oh, she's cooked," loud enough that a few people laughed under their breath. An older man in a Hawaiian shirt shook his head and said, "Lady, just walk away," while a woman holding a toddler pulled her phone up fully, clearly filming for her own story later. Deborah's face went through several colors. "This is harassment. I have every right to." The officer crouched, unzipped the carrier gently, and Daisy immediately wriggled toward me, not Deborah, tail a blur, recognizing my voice from the plane. "The dog's behavior alone tells us plenty," the officer said, "but we'll also be needing that folder, ma'am." Deborah didn't go quietly. She yanked the folder back, insisting she'd call her lawyer, and pivoted her outrage toward me instead. "You have no idea what you've done," she hissed as the officer gently but firmly guided her toward the security office. "I run that neighborhood. You think this ends here? Wait until your HOA fines start rolling in. Wait until every violation on that street suddenly has your name on it." True to her word, by the time I got home 2 days later, there was a stack of HOA notices waiting in my mailbox, 5 of them, backdated to before I'd even left for the airport, citing everything from unauthorized structure, the doghouse, to excessive noise, a puppy that, at that point, hadn't even set a paw in the yard yet. She'd apparently spent her evening in a holding room dictating fines to a fellow board member over the phone, weaponizing the one tool she had left. It might have worked, too, if Deborah Voss weren't already under investigation for something far bigger than doghouse paperwork. Because it turned out my puppy wasn't the first recovered pet Deborah had ever claimed. Marcus's contacts, digging through the airport security logs after the confrontation, found her name attached to 2 prior incidents at the same terminal over the past year, one involving a Labrador mix she'd claimed at a different airline's baggage claim, another involving a cat carrier she tried to intercept during a connecting flight layover. In both cases, the actual owners had been too rattled or too rushed to fight back, and Deborah had walked away with animals that were never hers, listing them afterward on a local rehoming page under different names, at a rehoming fee that conveniently lined her own pocket. Combined with the home security footage from Maple Crest Lane, the recorded phone call, and now 2 additional airport incidents pulled from surveillance archives, Deborah wasn't looking at a slap on the wrist anymore. She was looking at formal theft charges, and, in the most poetically fitting twist of all, an emergency HOA board vote, called by the very neighbors she'd fined for years, removing her from her presidency for conduct unbecoming of an HOA representative, effective immediately. She lost her binder. She lost her badge. And she lost the one puppy she'd wanted badly enough to plan an airport ambush for. Daisy, meanwhile, slept the entire ride home in my lap, utterly unaware she'd been at the center of the whole ordeal. The neighborhood, it turned out, had been quietly waiting for a reason to push back on Deborah for a long time. Within a week, the Andersons dropped by with a bundt cake and a story about their birdbath fine, laughing about it now that Deborah's reign was over. The Kapoor's garden gnome reappeared proudly on their porch the same afternoon her removal was finalized, like some tiny ceramic act of rebellion. My HOA fines, including the backdated ones, were formally voided by the new interim board, along with an apology letter and, weirdly, a fruit basket. Even the Hendersons, whose upstairs window had supposedly been so offended by my doghouse, stopped by to meet Daisy properly, laughing when I told them Deborah had cited their non-existent complaint months earlier. Marcus became something of a minor local hero, and the K-9 officer who'd walked up beside him, whose name, I learned afterward, was Tobias, partnered with a Malinois named Rex, got a heartfelt thank you card from half the street, plus a very good dog treat from Daisy herself, delivered personally at a little community gathering the new board organized a few weeks later. Daisy, for her part, grew into the backyard fast, chasing squirrels around the rebuilt doghouse, complete with a brand new nameplate, carved this time by the Andersons' teenage son as a housewarming gift. Looking back, what strikes me most isn't the audacity of a woman trying to steal a puppy at baggage claim in broad daylight. It's how far entitlement can travel when nobody stops to question it early, how a laminated binder and a confident voice let someone get away with pettiness for years, until pettiness quietly curdled into something much worse. The lesson, I think, is a simple one: paperwork isn't proof, confidence isn't ownership, and the people who hide behind rules the loudest are often the ones most willing to break the biggest ones when they think no one's watching. Cameras, community, and a little bit of stubborn documentation were the only things standing between my puppy and a stranger's trunk that day, and I'll never again assume a laminated binder means someone's actually in the right. So here's what I want to know from you: if you were standing at that baggage claim, watching a stranger unzip your dog's carrier and claim her as her own, what would you have done in that moment? Let me know in the comments, and if this story had you gripping your seat as much as it had me gripping that carrier, don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.